There is life on Mars. There is life in a Soviet Gulag during the 50s. There is life in hell. And then there is life in Dublin in 1904. That is my reading adventure for this week. Hello, welcome to my channel, Another Bibliophile Reads. My name is Greg, and this is my reading wrap-up ending July 27th. And what have I been reading? This is the fourth and final week of Rocket Summer, the great event created by Michael K. Vaughan, celebrating the reading of classic science fiction. And this week was devoted to science fiction published in the 60s. And the first thing I read was an audio book that is Stranger in a Strange Land by Robert A. Heinlein, originally published in 1961. However, it had its origins way back to 1948. I think Robert A. Heinlein was talking with his wife, and he decided that he should write a book based loosely off Kipling's The Jungle Tales, but instead of a boy raised by wolves, it would be the story of a boy raised by Martians. And this book starts off with a rocket exploring Mars with a small crew. But this rocket crashes. But along the way, the crew had been doing some hanky-panky, and there was a little baby born. And this baby was raised by Martians until, I guess, his early 20s, when a second expedition found him there. And he's technically human, physically, mostly, but he is also very Martian. The lives of Martians are very different from humans. And this young man, named Valentine Michael Smith, goes back to Earth. And he's not quite fitting in. He meets a wonderfully beautiful nurse who helps him escape from the Bethesda Medical Center and takes him down to an eccentric, cranky old man named Jubal Harshaw. And it's Harshaw. I have to remember not to say Jubal Early, because Jubal Early was a Confederate soldier during the Civil War, and I'm always confusing those two names. Well, anyway, Jubal Harshaw, as I said, is a cranky old man who's a bit of a Gary Stew. He is a doctor. He is a lawyer. He's a writer of fabulous bestsellers. And he's very wealthy. So he takes Jill and Valentine under his wing and hides them from the evil government. And this book was intended to be sort of challenging the morals of society, sex, religion, money, that sort of thing. And it took Heinlein about 10 years to write this book, because the times were not right to introduce the themes that he wanted to introduce. Because basically Michael, the Martian, introduces, and I'm going to use the old terminology, free love to society as the best way to live. A society that does not need money and does not really get involved with religion. Although Michael does get involved with religion. And I really enjoyed this book. This is probably the third time I read it. I originally read it when I was in high school, and then I listened to an audiobook version somewhere in the 90s. So I enjoy it. It's a little bit dated because all the morals that Heinlein wanted to challenge are now totally acceptable. Maybe not the money thing. Maybe that's still something to look forward to in the future. A society that is not so focused on money. I can highly recommend it. It is a bit sexist at times. The character of Jubal Harshaw is really kind of over the top, but I enjoyed that cranky old man. So if you have not read Stranger in a Strange Land, I say go ahead and read this classic science fiction novel. I also read a short story from the 60s. This is A Rose for Ecclesiastes by Roger Zelazny. Oddly enough, another story about Mars. I had not intended those two to be connected that way. But in this one, a poet who is very good with languages is sent to Mars to learn the Martian language, which is very different from human languages. And the Martians in this story are relatively humanoid. But I won't go into further detail because there are things going on in this story that are not quite clear on the surface at first. But you can probably pick up on them if you're a smart reader or want to go back and reread this. It's well-deserved to be in the Science Fiction Hall of Fame. Another great short story. I'm also going to be participating in Classics and Company in August, where I am going to be co-hosting a book, One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. I have read this book at least 3 times before, and yes, I got an early start on reading this book for next month. Since I'm technically a co-host, I want to be well prepared. I read the H.T. Willits translation, which is the only authorized translation that Solzhenitsyn approved of. Well, anyway, I will talk more about this on Classics and Company, but in essence, it is the day in the life of Ivan Denisovich Sukhov. He is a political prisoner. During World War II, he was briefly captured by the Germans, and the Soviet Union decided that he was a spy. So he is sentenced to 10 years in the Gulag. And the Gulag is not a place you would ever want to go to, not even to visit, probably not even work at. It is a horrible place to live and a horrible life that these men were forced into for no good reason at all. And it basically describes one day in his life, basically from waking up to going to sleep. In my version, there are no chapter breaks. It is just one continuous story. It is not long. Some people call this a novella. It's about 200 pages long, depending on the edition that you have or your translation. It is a well-deserved classic book. More to come on this later. Also on my Kindle, I got a little bit of a head start on Garbagest. I read City Infernal by Edward Lee. This was also a buddy read with Bad is Rad 2. This is the story of twin girls. And there is an unfortunate incident in the first chapter where one of the girls perishes by suicide. And the other twin has a rough time coping with her sister's suicide. Flash forward a few years, and the girl is living with her father in a remote part of Virginia. She meets 3 dead people in this ancient mansion that has a very notorious history. And these dead people are sort of refugees from hell. And because this house has such a notorious reputation, there's actually a direct path from her home into a great city of hell. And Edward Lee is known for being rather gross and sexual. So most of this book is sort of a travelogue of the girl and her 3 friends going through hell. And all sorts of gross things happen. There's all sorts of visceral torture of people, as you'd sort of expect. But these 4 people have to escape the demonic police. And this is where I sort of have a real beef with this book. Let's just say the characters are in a tight situation. They're being surrounded by the demonic police, and they have to escape. Well, one of the characters remembers a spell that you can cast. It's called the Hand of Glory. If you voluntarily chop off one of your hands, you can create an invisibility spell. And this is what they do. Now, chopping off a hand for a dead person, not quite so drastic it would be if you were alive, but I think it's an easy out. It creates this system of magic where just anything can happen. And it basically comes out of nowhere. And Edward Lee uses that gimmick in a couple of different ways and a couple of different times. And I just found that a little too pat, a little too easy. You want to make your characters work harder for their escape. But again, this was not more about that. This is more about the travelogue, showing all the catalog of horrors that hell can provide. And for that, it was okay. This is not going to be a favorite novel that I've ever read by Edward Lee. I've read about 6 or 7, and this ranks sort of at the bottom for me. The Big Head and The Coven are probably, and Gast would be my 3 favorite books that I have read by him so far. And this is the first in a quartet of books, so the story of hell can continue if you so choose. I have finished Ulysses, finally, after 2 months. I am going to leave a link to the discussions I had with the Ulysses 6, so you can get a lot more in detail about this novel. James Joyce was an immensely talented author, hugely intelligent, maybe too intelligent, because this book just cannot be read as a simple novel. And that's how I intended or tried to read this book. I tried to read it without secondary sources, and that may not have been the best choice. So while I do recognize it as a great novel, it is not a very good novel, in my opinion. It really requires a lot of effort from the reader. I think people who read this and take notes and then write papers for their college professor are probably going to get a lot more out of this book than I did. But still, I'm immensely happy and pleased that I have read Ulysses. It is a book that all serious readers should consider picking up sometime in their life. And that is a wrap for the week ending July 27th. It's almost August. It's almost Garbogust. I have one serious novel I'm going to read, and then I'm just going to dig into the trash a bit early. Thank you so much for watching, and keep on reading.